welcome back to Two Dudes, One Barbell. This is episode 3. Today we're going to be revisiting our goal setting from podcast number 1, talking about the golfers study that John has. And we're also going to be touching on some more about the stress hormones that we touched on in last week's podcast as well, which is some really interesting stuff. So let's get into it. We've got this study.
Should we talk about the goal setting study first?
Yeah, I reckon so.
And then after all talking about everything, then we'll move on to our new topic.
New topic today, which is the Pareto Principle?
Pareto Principle, yeah.
Pareto, okay.
Which some of you may already know it, and we'll go into some depth. It just makes sense. It's just a skewed distribution. We'll talk about that in a second. Sorry, get closer to the mic. Okay, so let's talk about that study that we looked at 2 weeks ago.
We talked about it in the first podcast.
Yeah, and then I skimmed over it and didn't really say anything, right? I just said, there was 37 golfers and they did goal setting. That was
and then we talked about what type of goals and stuff like that. Yeah, so.
Now, we talked about the types of goals because you need to know what the types of goals are before you can understand the study. So what happened is there was 37 golfers, right? And they were all taught about goal setting at the start. So everyone was taught about goal setting. At the start, and then there was a couple of phases where they split them into 2 groups and focused on 2 different types of goal setting. So just to rehash, the 2 types of goal setting that they focused on were performance goals and process goals. And if you remember, or if you didn't listen last time, a process goal is focusing on how you do things. An example of that would be making sure that you hit your macros every day.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's 3 liters of water every day.
That's your process. A performance goal is aiming for a particular performance, and the easiest is like hitting a particular weight on a squat, deadlift, whatever.
Yeah.
It's measurable, but it's a target, but a different sort of target. A performance goal.
Yeah. So it's kind of like lose 500 grams a week versus eat 2,000 calories per day.
Exactly. The 500 grams is less within,
it's somewhat in your control, but it's a performance goal. It's like you performed this well in your diet this week.
Yeah, that was a perfect example in terms of nutrition. So one group was focused on process goals and one group was focused on performance goals, and then they had a control.
Yep.
So the control does not change, right? They do not influence them with the goal setting at all. I think they initially taught them about goal setting just so everyone had a benchmark. And then what they did is they tested with Likert scales people's stress tolerance or anxiety levels based off how anxious they thought they got in performance. And they also had a self-efficacy scale, which was also to do with confidence. And over the season, they also looked at whether their performance got better. So in golf, they have a handicap.
Yep.
If people are not familiar with that, I'm not an expert in golfing, but the lower the number, the better the number.
Yeah, the better the player, basically, yeah.
So what they found with the 2 groups is that both the process goal group and the performance goal group improved pretty much the same. It wasn't significantly different in terms of their performance, so their handicap went down. The control group didn't actually go down. So that was interesting. So if they didn't set goals properly,
they didn't improve it.
They didn't really improve.
Yeah, okay.
But both types of goals helped. But what was interesting is that the people who focused on performance goals, they actually had a decrease in self-efficacy. So they were less confident in their ability, even though they had got better.
Yeah, okay.
In fact, the control group improved in confidence, even though they didn't get better. So that's quite interesting. So focusing on performance goals solely, so only focusing on the targets, can decrease confidence based off the study.
Yeah.
But the process goals actually improved people's self-efficacy. So their perceived ability to succeed.
Because they were probably ticking off things day to day, and like performance or marker goals are like anxiety, like inducing just in general. Like if you're in sales or something like that, and you've got to hit a certain target at the end of every month.
Exactly.
Yeah, you might hit the target, but it's still anxiety inducing.
Yeah. Now we talked about in both weeks, right? A little bit of anxiety or a little bit of stress is actually important.
Yeah.
But it goes to show that you need both performance goals and process goals. It's unlikely that, if you focus on the process, it's going to get you somewhere, for sure. But at the end of the day, I think all of them in the back of their mind knew that they wanted to improve their handicap.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's no point ticking the boxes and not getting better. Like, if you weren't seeing those actual, like, my handicap dropped, then you wouldn't be as motivated to keep going, or it would defeat the purpose of the process.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, like, why? I mean, if the process is walking in a particular direction, you have to walk in a direction.
Yeah.
It's like people trying to get their steps walking around their house. It's kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay, but like, it's a bit weird.
Like, put it in context, it's like someone who's working hard, tracking their macros, getting all their steps in a day, training hard, and like maintaining body weight.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly like
and
that.
And putting in the hard yards and not going anywhere because they're aiming for a performance goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless their like goal is maintenance, but you wouldn't have to work that hard usually.
Yeah, I mean, there could be other health markers, but they would probably be measuring them, right? If it wasn't weight loss,
it'd be some other performance.
Exactly. So that clears up that study, and we have some. If you scroll down, we can actually probably show some of this.
Yeah. Since we're on YouTube now, we're gonna chuck up some graphics of the studies and the results.
So I sort of summarized it. If you go down probably a bit further, I think there is a. Yeah. Does that one show? Changes in
cognitive anxiety and concentration.
Yeah. So. I didn't talk about concentration, but if you zoom in a bit, we can have a look and see if there was much change in concentration. Looks like the process group improved in concentration somewhat. The control group actually decreased. The performance group sort of stayed about the same. We'd have to do some maths to see if that was significant, but it looks like process goals improve in concentration as well. So it's like win-win-win. Make sure you do your process goals, write your lists,
and still have some outcome goals, basically.
And you need to have your outcome goals, otherwise you don't know where you're going.
Yeah. For anyone who wants to know, John is the study guy. John knows this stuff back to front. He can look at a study and know what's going on. I'm still getting clued in.
Yeah, well, as we move on, I'm sure...
I'll pick up some stuff.
And then you'll probably be pulling up the studies for us, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so the M stands for mean and the SD is the standard deviation. That's how far away from the average that is.
Okay.
If you're looking at the numbers. I'm not going to probably go into too much detail. We won't do maths today, but
all right. But
you can see that there's an improvement, right? You can see improvements in numbers. We can maybe delve into statistics another day.
Yeah. Yeah, the self-efficacy of the process goals was much higher. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Fantastic. Cool. And so that's what we wanted to touch on when it comes to goal settings. We didn't talk about that study very much, but
I think we cleared that up, and now people understand that
the practical takeaway is you
and it has been scientifically measured.
So
we can talk about some limitations of the study. Maybe I should talk about that.
Yeah.
Because like science is not always so clear cut. They did measure based off surveys. And there can be bias when people are self-reporting. This is what people perceive their concentration to be. Actually, I don't know about the concentration tasks, but in terms of self-efficacy and their anxiety control, those were surveys.
Yeah.
So that was their perceived ability.
So it's subjective, not like an actual...
Yeah, subjective. So there can be limitations in terms of the metrics, but it does give you a fair indication. I mean, confidence in itself is subjective a lot of the time, and your subjective view is going to impact your actual performance.
And if they recorded like a change on average across all the participants, then it's safe to say.
It's safe to say that there probably is going to be some change, and especially when they have a control group, which, as you can see,
didn't
really change. Another thing is usually in interventional studies, that's where they've intervened and they've given them something. Usually it's accepted that only applies to the group that was intervened on. So that only applies to golfers.
Yeah, okay.
However, what they're measuring is the humanity of them, not the fact that they're golfers, right? So there should be more broad application.
There's a carryover to like most other things. I'm sure there definitely is. Like, You can see this in like clients when they start taking off their own things on a daily basis, they get more confident that they can. They know that they are capable of it.
Exactly. There's more of a broad application than just in golfers. So, but for those of you who are into research, usually we would say that only applies to golfers or competitive club players.
Is that
would be
just as a rule of thumb to not overstep the boundaries of
it's
what you're
very
talking
important.
about?
It's very important, especially when we're dealing with health markers, that it only applies to the group
To the group that you're testing.
yeah. Because there's changes, like say we were testing on someone who was diabetic or had some other metabolic issue, and then you were trying to extrapolate that to another disease or extrapolate, the application is not going to be the same when people intervene with diets and that sort of thing, or even drugs, right? Because obviously a drug is
going to work differently on
different things and different ages and different genders.
Yeah, it's a lot more specific.
Yeah.
But I guess
goal setting is more broad.
Yeah, absolutely. And things like self-efficacy and they're not health markers necessarily or anything that's impacted by
they're actually pretty universal. Right?
Yeah.
The application of how a human mind works is
and how you feel
we've got the same organs and the same chemicals, and so
it might change on the specific population. These are obviously athletes that might respond better to it rather than someone who's
it'd be interesting for us to look at people who are resistant to goal setting, and I'm sure you've met people who don't want to set goals, and we've talked about that before. I think it might be to do with the anxiety-inducing performance goals.
Yeah, if they set the standard and then they aim for just to lose a kilo a month or something like that, or just to hit a certain PB every month.
And some people would just don't want to risk failing. So, but it'd be interesting to look at maybe the differences in personality types.
Yeah, the things that sort of outline who would be resistant to it.
But anyway, should we move on?
Yeah, let's talk about the second one. So in our last podcast, we talked about stress hormones and how much stress is the right amount and how to utilize it and how to avoid, overstressing.
Yeah, we talked about sleep, and then I talked about glucocorticoids,
which is super interesting.
And I think I'm slightly misinformative.
Okay.
Because the way that I said that glucose displaced cortisol, which is not completely correct.
No.
But we can think of it like that practically.
Yeah.
Anyway, so do you want to rehash what we said about what I said about?
Because we talked about this yesterday. So basically, we were saying that when you're stressed out, your body releases cortisol. One of the roles of cortisol is to
mobilize sugar, right? So that's why we call it a glucocorticoid. A glucocorticoid acts on glucose metabolism.
Yeah.
Right? So that means it activates certain pathways with glucose. So one of the things that cortisol does is it increases the amount of sugar that your liver is going to make. And that's called gluconeogenesis.
Yeah.
And gluconeogenesis means that you're making glucose from things that is not glucose.
Yes. Yeah.
So usually just protein, maybe a little bit from glycerol, which is the backbone of fat.
Yep.
But mainly just mobilizing amino acids and sending them to the liver, which is
to try and get your blood sugar up, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And then your blood sugar is going to start rising, and you're going to use that sugar, and your blood pressure is going to increase.
And so that's because normally when you're in a stressed out state, you mobilize energy to be able to deal with that stressed out situation, right? And so that...
And sugar is great, or glucose is great, synonymous, they're the same thing.
Yeah.
It's great because we can metabolize it quickly without oxygen, and we can metabolize it with oxygen. It's pretty universal.
So it's a super efficient energy source that our body loves to use in a stressful situation.
And it's the only energy source for your brain and central nervous system.
Yeah.
Well, ketones do count, but for this argument, it's just glucose. So what happens is your cortisol goes up, then your blood sugar goes up, or blood glucose goes up. And then we were talking about this negative feedback loop, right? I talked about displacing, which was slightly incorrect, but what happens if you short circuit that and you have glucose or sugar, it stops the release of cortisol because your body's like, oh, we've got enough.
Yeah, we've got enough blood sugar.
We've hit a certain concentration.
We don't need to mobilize more energy, basically.
Yeah, because we've already
hit a level. We're already covered.
We're not using it. We've hit a certain concentration. We don't need to release cortisol anymore.
And so you can, subside the cortisol release, or
you can short circuit the cortisol release by having cheap foods.
Having cheap foods, yeah.
High
Having sugar,
high
basically.
sugar foods, yeah.
And so this is where comfort foods come into it. And there's even the study that we're going to talk about. It's like one of the things is plus comfort food.
Yeah, I showed you this yesterday.
Yeah. And so we've got the what he was explaining, the system sort of.
We've got two little models here. One is stress with
Just stress.
And the usual response is like increasing central nervous system activity. You've got cortisol, it's going to help mobilize glucose and things get working.
Yeah.
And it inhibits insulin, which stores glucose. So it stops glucose going into muscle and it stops glucose going into fat.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
So
insulin, that's just stopping insulin, right?
So it's just ready to use for whatever purpose we need to in that stressful situation.
Yeah, and then if you short circuit it by eating some sort of comfort food
and spiking that blood sugar,
then you have a release of insulin, but also a spike in glucose in the blood.
Mm-hmm.
They think that it's the glucose that short circuits the cortisol release, but then you have an environment where you still have cortisol in the blood, or the glucocorticoids, and insulin, and they think that combination of hormones contributes to central obesity. Well, that's what they say in the study anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
But then I told you yesterday that I don't.
You're a bit on the fence with it.
Yeah. I would need to probably see a little bit more research. It's like just saying that stress leads to obesity. I mean,
I'm sure it doesn't help.
Chronic stress probably doesn't help, but based off what cortisol actually does, it mobilizes fatty acids, it increases.
So you'd sort of get, like, you'd think that a stressful situation like that, getting the blood sugar up, would make you more energetic.
It
right?
does.
Yeah, and it'd make you more energetic, so you'd probably come to the, like, you could say that because you're more energetic, you're probably going to do more.
Yeah.
And that would lead to more burning of calories and energy, right? So I guess it depends how you use the
and also probably depends on how long your body is releasing those particular hormones.
Yeah.
Anyway, the issue with short-circuiting the comfort release from these comfort foods is your body learns that, and you may not even be conscious of it, your body learns that if I eat this, I don't feel as stressed out.
Yeah. And so that's the tub of ice cream after a long stressful day of work or after a breakup or something super stressful. Everyone, like, you don't crave bacon and eggs, you crave sugary things and sweet comfort foods.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you're craving the carbohydrates, not just the tasty food.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see the impact. Well, we can have a look at the difference between a sweetener and and sucrose, which is just sugar.
So why don't we explain how the study worked and what they did?
Should we? Yeah, we'll go through that. Yeah. So we had two groups. One group was given a sucrose solution, which is just sugar, right? Yeah. It's actually table sugar. Yeah. And then the other one was given a sweetener.
Like an artificial sweetener, yes.
Was
that aspartame?
Aspartame, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they were given the
Montreal Imaging Stress Task.
So that was supposed to be stress inducing, and this particular task increases cortisol.
Yeah.
So they didn't actually know that they were testing the sugary drinks, and both groups got a sugary drink to see.
So you said it was a double blind, is what you said, so they didn't know.
Yeah, the double blind means that the people testing them didn't know who got the sugary drink. And hopefully they didn't ask them, because you can kind of tell when it's sweetener or not. Yeah. And then the group that were being tested didn't actually know what they were being tested for.
Yeah.
So that reduces the
possibility of
like perceived ideas that, if I have sugar, then I feel less
stress. And
feel less stress.
There's a placebo effect.
Exactly.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah. So they had no idea about
They had no idea. They drank the two tests. They drank this solution, and then they were exposed to the Montreal Imaging Stress Task, and they measured the serum cortisol levels.
Yes, and then if you look at the average pre and post, so scrolling up a little bit, and obviously down a bit, just that top image.
This one,
yeah, you can see that on average, the sweetener group, the cortisol actually kept rising through the task, and the sucrose group,
it dropped.
It dropped.
It just went down. Yeah.
Like after initial spike, it just dropped.
Yeah. So we'll chuck these up on the video.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys can see what happened. But it's really interesting. So if you were stressed out and you went for one of these comfort foods, if you chose the artificial sweetener, it wouldn't do anything.
It probably wouldn't work.
No,
Yeah.
you need that sugar, not just the sweetness. You might get a placebo effect from the sweetness and feeling
Probably.
better. Like that's what I was talking to someone about just last night, was the sweetness induced like dopamine response from eating something delicious might make you feel better
Yeah.
as well.
And also in some people, certain sweetness might release insulin, and it may be insulin acting on cortisol, not necessarily the glucose rise. They don't know the mechanisms yet, so
yeah, okay. So
but in this task, this particular sweetener
didn't work.
didn't work.
Didn't work, yeah. Okay,
So-
and sucrose worked really well at reducing the stress and serum cortisol levels for people that were going through this Montreal stress thing.
I wonder if you did it with cream,
Hey?
or like did it with like another macronutrient,
Yeah.
if it would have a different impact.
You mean like a high-fat food, like cream?
Yeah, like a high fat or I don't know.
Just to see what happens.
Just
That'd be
to see
interesting if they did more tests like this.
I mean, because glucocorticoids act on sugar, it makes sense for you to intervene with sucrose,
Yeah.
right? Because that's what's going up in the blood. But it'd be interesting to see the interactions with other macronutrients.
to see if it do anything.
Change anything.
This similar test, I think, should be done with a lot of different. Like stress is a major industry right now. Everyone's looking
Yeah.
for something to quell stress. If they can figure out, like I'd be doing this with everything I can think of.
Yeah. Well, we can go have a look at some of the other studies. I just
To say-
found this one.
Yeah, well, this one's super interesting. So
Just to fact check me.
basically, what we're trying to say is as well that just to dumb it down for someone that might not be following is when you get stressed out, you crave sugar not only because of like a psychological, but like potentially psychological reason to make you feel better, but there's a biological factor into why you might be craving those foods,
Yeah.
which I thought was really interesting because a lot of people will crave the comfort food and have the comfort food and then feel guilty about it. And we were saying like, if you could minimize, like instead of having a whole tub of ice cream, and just have enough to quell that need for filling that like blood sugar increase,
Yeah.
you might be able to feel better without the following guilt from the whole tub. You could just have a little half cup or something.
Yeah,
like that.
knowing that that's going to quell the cortisol.
Knowing it's going to help you de-stress before blowing into the whole thing.
The problem with carbohydrates and sugar, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you have this problem, but I definitely have this problem. If I have a little bit,
You can't stop.
I can't stop.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
the big
it's
issue.
like the domino effect. It's like, I'm just going to have one slice of pizza.
Oh, yeah.
Said no one ever.
Yeah,
Right?
or like one Malteser or something like that. You
Yeah.
don't just have one.
With
no.
2 blocks of chocolate, like
Yeah,
a normal
it's
serving
rough.
size of
So-
chocolate, you're not going
That's
to.
just
Yeah.
complete flow on. That's why something actually my friend was talking about. She was like, maybe you could find a way to remove like what's the most flavorless version of this that you could have that would be enough to
Teaspoon of sugar.
teaspoon of sugar. Do you reckon
Right.
that would
Like,
that would be the fastest
if,
way to do it.
If you have a teaspoon of sugar, you're not going to probably want to
Have
eat
another
another teaspoon of
teaspoon of
sugar. Does that,
Unless I don't know,
You know,
maybe
like-
some people.
I mean, if you did Milo, you might skip
Milo,
the whole
definitely,
thing,
yeah.
right?
I wonder
But
if anyone does that. Like, I wonder if like
just has a
just
teaspoon.
has a teaspoon of sugar, like just eats it, like sits there eating teaspoons of sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, someone should try it.
I mean,
someone should try it when they're
When I was a
stressed.
kid, I used to get the sachets of sugar. My parents would have a coffee and just eat the sachet of sugar, but it was like maybe 2 max.
That could
That's
work.
weird.
I mean, like
Yeah.
that's a distinct measurement.
That is
right?
actually, yeah. So it's like a 15 gram or whatever sachet.
Yeah. It's just whether that's enough to ameliorate the effects
The
of
issue,
cortisol. Yeah.
So you'd have to know the dose in that.
Yeah, but we don't have a clue.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Again, people could run their own experiments and be like, I'm going to have half a bowl of ice cream and see if that makes me feel
See if
better.
that's enough.
And
yeah.
next time I'll do 3/4 a bowl. And then.
Yeah. No, definitely need the whole tub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's super interesting and very practical for people to know, I think. So a lot of people, I didn't know about it. And so a lot of people knowing the fact that it's not, that's like, they shouldn't beat themselves up so much if they're having a super stressful time and they need carbohydrates. Because you like, there's a little bit of, I kind of need this to help me deal with the stress.
Yeah, and part of it's learned behavior, right? Because
Yeah, so you learn
the
that
more
you
you
can.
do it, the more you reinforce the particular behavior. So
Yeah.
if every time you're stressed, you have
Ice
that
Yeah.
much ice cream, and it's reinforcing that dopamine release, rewarding the behavior because
Yeah.
you reduce the stress and that sort of thing. So it is a little.
That's a dangerous, slippery slope.
Yeah. So I don't know if I would be encouraging people to.
To use this as an intervention?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if we knew the actual dose, then
Yeah,
maybe.
and you
but
could say just 1 teaspoon of sugar,
Yeah.
and that'll make you feel better. Yeah.
but practically,
You don't want to be using that to reinforce like a stressful day every time.
yeah.
Because then people's like bar might change on how it's stressful as
Yeah,
needed
then we have to turn up the dose, right?
Yeah, increase the dose amount to feel better. They go with the idea that maybe if I eat more sugar, I'll feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but it's an interesting.
It's definitely interesting to talk about, and there definitely would be some people who could get away with just doing the teaspoon
And then
and probably be okay, but a lot of people probably would be like
be able to
me
pull
and
themselves up.
just dominant.
Yeah, I guess if you're strong enough to resist the sugary goodness, then it might be a good idea.
I mean, the cool thing about acute amounts of glucose, it helps with focus, concentration, performance. Like glucose is
a lot of people demonize sugar, but it's
pretty useful stuff. I mean, why does your body make it?
Yeah, why is it our primary energy source? Like it's like that for a reason. Cutting sugar out of your diet completely is never.
It's possible.
It's possible, and was it carbohydrates are the only non-essential macronutrient?
Yeah,
So
because your body can make them.
Yeah,
right? So your
gluconeogenesis, right?
Yeah. So your body's actually always making glucose, and it just depends on your levels of stress hormones how much it's actually making.
Okay.
And that's why people on no carbohydrate diets, 0 carbohydrates. I mean, maybe a little bit from muscle glycogen, because usually these people are just eating meat and other,
Yep, like full keto.
Full keto, whatever, carnivore.
Yeah.
They can make the glucose from amino acids, and it might be slightly upregulated. We'd have to look at some of those studies. I mean, actually, I don't know if there's that many studies on people doing carnivore, but we could look at low carb.
Yes.
We could look at very low carbohydrate diets, and you could see, you can see that they flatline with their glucose. Most of us are gonna surge with our meals and that sort of thing, but because they don't ingest glucose, their insulin flatlines and their blood glucose flatlines.
Okay.
Which is
good or bad?
I don't know. Yeah, it's hard
to.
I mean.
Okay, it'd be good for diabetic people, right?
Possibly.
Possibly.
Yeah. I mean, low carbohydrate diets are used as
interventions
for cancer, type 2 diabetes, epilepsy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's actually the main reason. That was the main reason that the main intervention of keto initially was epilepsy in children.
Okay, and then what people started realizing they feel all right on keto, and then.
Yeah, I think there was what's the guy's name who went to the Inuits up in Canada, and then he saw that they didn't eat any carbohydrates and they were fine.
Well, not veggie, is it? No.
What was his name? We'd have to check. His last name's Price.
Price. Okay.
I can't remember his first name. Anyway, he went up there and looked at them, and then
they just eat like seal fat or something like that.
Seal fat, maybe a few berries when it's summer or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he came back and he says, "Look, you can live without these things." He says, "Lock me in a room, and I will just eat meat and I'll survive." And then everyone thought that he would die, but he didn't. Yeah.
That's sick. That's a really cool story. Okay.
We have to find out where his book is. A lot of the keto carnivore people really like his stuff.
Yeah. Well, it justifies their.
When was that? That was early 1900s, right? So that's so it's a long time ago.
Well, it would have to have been for him to come back and people be like, "No, he's gonna die if we lock him in here and eat meat."
Yeah. I think the ketogenic diet became a thing in 1920s.
Okay.
So it's quite old.
100 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't 100 years old.
One.
Well, I'm sure it's older than that, but naming it.
Yeah, naming it, making it official. That's all right, and so the last thing we wanted to talk about today was this thing called the Pareto Principle.
Pareto
Principle. I'll let you say it, 'cause I have no idea what this is yet.
Okay, well, that's a guy, right? Pareto was an economist. Okay. All right. Okay, we're going. We're stepping out of our mouths. We said it was just health, fitness, but we're going to touch on some economics. Not really, just the principle.
It's just applicable. Yeah.
So, the Pareto Principle is the idea that you get 80% of the outcome from 20% of the effort.
Oh, yeah, okay.
The
Yeah.
80-20 principle.
Yes.
You've heard of that
yeah,
before?
Of course, yeah.
So that's the Pareto Principle. That's the name of it.
Yeah.
So you know what it is.
Yeah.
So we wanted to talk about the Pareto Principle in relation to exercise and nutrition. What is the big
rocks?
The big
like,
rocks.
Yeah, as Jackson was saying, the big rocks. So the main things to focus on that do the most work.
That give you the most return. So what gives you the most return on investment in terms of focusing on? Because there is clearly, whether it's 80-20 or it's 30-70, who cares?
But the idea is
it's a skewed distribution. You get more from a small amount than you do from focusing on the wrong things.
Yeah.
And this is where a lot of people fall apart, and that's why it was probably a good topic for us to talk about.
Yeah, especially when it comes to fitness and fitness industries, because a lot of people are focusing on very much the wrong things before nailing the basics. So for instance, if you're worried about what type of protein shake you're having before you even get enough protein in your day, or you're worried about what fat burn is going to make you lose more fat, but you're only sleeping 5 hours a night, or
okay, so which one should we address first? Should we talk about the exercise? Because I think we can segment exercise and nutrition, and then maybe we can summarize and bring them together.
Yep. So we'll start with the exercise. So
and I have a question for you.
Okay.
If you were to only do 4 exercises,
four exercises
ever, this is a horrible question for a bodybuilder. Which 4 exercises would it be in terms of, for the rest of your life? You only did 4.
Like for practical application or bodybuilding specifically?
Well, we can do both. Let's do practical.
So practical application, so
we're gonna find out where his skew is. We look at I know with the bodybuilder you focus, I'm sure lateral raises will
just lateral raises for day. Like a squat. Squat and deadlift, because they're your big knee flexion and hip hinge movements, so that's like
cool
practical functional movements. Because if you're talking about like practicality in the real world, upper body stuff, it's hard. Like I'd probably go maybe pull-ups and dips.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I did this honestly.
I'm
not quizzing.
You're not judging me.
Yeah.
All right. That's probably what I'd go. So
So you went for a squat, deadlift, pull-up, and dips. Was there a particular type of squat and a particular type of deadlift, or was it just a back squat, deadlift? You see, now if you specify, you can see which ones you get the most return on.
I'd have to say, for practical application, something like a sumo deadlift would be more like in how you pick up things on a day-to-day basis.
You pick up things with your legs spread, like out, and then lever.
Well, you think of like, how do you pick up a pot plant or something like that, or like a box?
So it's like a narrow stance sumo.
Narrow stance sumo deadlift, but like it's closer to what you do with like. I was just thinking to myself, like helping my mum move pot plants in the backyard, and like how I can't conventional a pot plant up really.
No,
as much as you'd like to. You might be able to do it easier, but So
and then that's the question, right? How much does like a conventional deadlift transfer to lifting things?
And the same as like.
What about a trap bar deadlift? Does that work better?
Potentially, that's more in a picking up sort of position. I was gonna say, because you're doing more of a squat when you're picking up something like that anyway. Like the OH&S lifting is more of a squat movement, not so much a hip hinge.
Yeah, they do teach to squat
down and use your legs, lift with your legs.
But that's not how I pick things up.
No?
No, I bend from the hip.
From the hip,
Yeah.
Well, you can RDL 200 kilos, so you can pick up anything from the hip.
Yeah, anything under 200 kilos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most things you should be picking up is hopefully under 200 kilos.
Anyway, my thoughts for my 4 was a front squat.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. And I'll clarify why I think these. Front squat, stiff leg deadlift or RDL.
Yep. Okay.
So we've got a bend and we've got a squat pattern.
Yep.
Overhead press.
Okay. Yeah.
And a reverse lunge.
Reverse lunge. Okay, you really like the reverse lunges. We learned that last week. All right, you want to explain why?
Okay, so front squat. The reason I picked a front squat over a back squat is the body position that you're in is going to help stabilize or create the posture that you need in everyday life. Your upper back is loaded well. It's more quad dominant. It's easier to recover from. The load is not as high and you get more stimulus from it than you would a back squat, right? I love back squats. It's very hard for me to say this. But a front squat probably for most people has more applicability to
Well, that's why, isn't it like the primary tester of athletic ability? They go a front squat rather than a back squat?
Athletic ability. I'm
That's
not
just
100%.
something I've heard that like they rather test your front squat and have you proficient at a front squat than a back squat. If you
Well,
like.
that makes perfect sense. But
Yeah.
I haven't seen the stuff on that, but that makes sense to me for the same reasons that we're talking about. It's more athletic position, has more transfer to most sports.
And a lot more like core stability. I was doing them last night. I'm busted to death. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
front squats are wonderful,
They're
right?
punishing.
Yeah.
Punishing.
Yeah, I'm glad
okay.
you're back into them.
Yeah.
So good. Anyway, why would I do a stiff leg deadlift? The reason is you can eccentrically load it.
Okay.
With a deadlift, it's completely concentric, which is fine, and it's great for lifting heavy things. But I think training as a stiff leg variation, you're going to get more transfer.
Okay, because you can eccentrically load it as well.
Yeah, so
know,
you're
that's
actually
like
training
something
both phases. You're going to get some decent hammy stimulation, your torso position. You have to maintain a decent brace through the whole movement. Sometimes, just a standard deadlift from the floor, things can bend and get a bit funny.
Yeah.
Right. So I actually, from your own experience, you've been doing stiffies for
A long,
a long time, and then you only just started deadlifting again.
Yeah. I was doing stiffies last night, and I feel way better than deadlifts. Just
Yeah.
as a rule, pretty much.
So this is my general application. Why overhead press?
Yeah. I'm gonna say core stability as well, and like
Core stability, transfer of maintaining stiffness while pressing in movement. It's just my one pressing movement in upper body. I didn't have an upper body pull, but that's because we're in a front squat position. I feel like
that's
you
a
get
lot of
an
back, upper back, and
and
then
then
a lot of lat. Yeah.
And the RDL, you're going to get a lot of back from
That's fair.
stabilizing in a back position.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reverse lunge. Because they're awesome. When we're walking, right, nothing is really in this bipedal position. Like, where both feet are planted next to each other.
Yeah.
You're usually
Unilateral.
unilateral. So loading that to some extent would probably be useful.
Yep.
And I'm going to say front rack position
Yeah.
because it's the same posture that you want.
Core stability. So those are practically applied exercises. And so,
Yeah.
like we were saying, the getting the most out of your training in regards to what you're trying to say, what you're programming into yourself and what you're focusing on.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's it's something I got off someone on Instagram, but I refer to like the first few exercises of a session as like your meat and potatoes exercises.
Yeah, that's what I would say too.
Yeah. And so the big, like the prime movers, you want to put the most energy into. You want to make sure you're progressing them, and you're gonna get way more work out of those ones than you are your bicep curls at the end of the session.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so your meat and potato exercises for athletic ability, different to a bodybuilding idea as well, like I was going to say.
Let's touch on the bodybuilding one. So just to quickly summarize what it would be for sort of general strength and health.
And that's what I was going to say, like that's what you're thinking of, like
that's
functional athleticism, you're obviously trying to do Olympic lifting.
As I possibly can find.
To real world application.
Or to anything, hopefully.
Yeah.
Which would be a squat pattern. I picked the front squat.
Yeah.
A hip hinge. I picked a stiff leg deadlift.
You press overhead.
A press, some sort of press, which an overhead press stabilizes the shoulder. It's got a lot of applicability if people can do it, of course. Right? I mean, it's quite a hard movement.
If you were doing
same
it
with
from
the front squat,
if you're doing it from day dot, like it's super beneficial.
Yeah.
I think that's more important. Like some people can't squat because they've spent years not being able to squat and getting into terrible
exactly. So
shape.
obviously there'll be you'll be training the same movements, but maybe not these specific variations. And then a lunge pattern. But I think if we were to split them up, we could just do a squat, a bend, a push, a pull, and probably a carry.
I was almost gonna chuck a carry in there because
Yeah.
I knew that would have real world application.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we did some carries last Friday.
Like I did most of this. I did front squat last night, RDL last night. I did a suitcase carry last night,
Nice.
and the only thing I didn't do was an overhead press. Yeah, so
Well, you got everything
I got
covered
most of the practical stuff done.
in one session.
And then the nuance for bodybuilding is the fact that if that's like functional capability, absolutely not.
Bodybuilding is not
It's
functional.
not necessary. That's not like the main priority.
Okay, we just want to get
Establish that bodybuilding. If your goal is to just get bigger and hypertrophy, building muscle,
Yeah.
then you're better off taking away more of the risks of faulting on a movement. So you'd switch out a squat for a leg press because your form can become a little shabbier as you reach higher thresholds of closer to failure, which is the goal for hypertrophy, is to push yourself as close to failure as you can. If you did AMRAP, as many reps as possible on squats for every set, you'd injure yourself if you're not capable of it. Regular person would injure themselves
I'm only good for one set of failure, once a month.
Yeah, so you do some pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But for a bodybuilder, you'll see the guys on the leg press pushing till they nearly shit themselves for most sessions, and you couldn't do that with a back squat.
Yeah. Also, with a back squat or even a front squat, like I said, part of the reason why I think it's so useful is because of the spinal loading of the stability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas in bodybuilding,
it's not so much.
Who cares? You're gonna hit your back later, so
and your goal is just to get
legs.
bigger muscles, not necessarily be able to function in life. So my big four for bodybuilding would be probably a leg press, definitely probably a bench press.
Cool.
I'd have to say chin-ups, and I want to have a shoulder movement in there, but that means one leg exercise. So that's completely rational with a leg press. I'm going to say lateral raises. I'm going to say that's the four.
Hey, you gotta do lateral raises.
You gotta do lateral raises. Not much else to get them big cap delts.
Yeah. So what we've worked out is with bodybuilding, honestly, you couldn't stick to 4 movements.
No, you need much more variety.
Yeah.
But if you're training for practical application just to feel healthier and fitter, you can limit them to more effective movements, right?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that people should just do 4 movements. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying.
But John said I only have to do the 4.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you could probably get away with just the 4.
Better than nothing, absolutely.
But
you can do a lot better.
Yeah, if you focus on them, you're going to get more out of your training.
Out of those specific exercises. And so you're going to get way more out of the front squat than you are out of a leg press if you're not doing bodybuilder style training. If your goal is to be functionally moving and healthy, you're better off doing a front squat than spending a year doing leg press.
But it'll probably, if you want your quads to get bigger, actually maybe a leg press might even be better than a front squat. And a front squat's pretty damn good for you.
Because a front squat is so taxing on the core, and it's just so brutal that you can't push your legs to near failure because your upper body is crumpling.
Yeah, your upper body. Well, my upper back fails before my legs.
Yeah, and you end up sinking into it.
Okay, now we've got a little bit of time. Do we have enough time to do the nutrition? Is that enough?
Yeah,
Do we need to talk about cardio?
No. Maybe another time. We can touch on a few things. We might have to come back to this another time and talk about the practical application of this and what you should focus your time on. Because we're trying to talk about what the big rocks are and the things you should focus on. So
I mean that also includes what sort of intensity, how many times per week, that sort of thing.
Which is a big conversation.
Yeah.
Potentially.
If I just skim over it quickly and no one listens, if you stop listening to us completely after this, 2 times per week with those 4 movements, a 45-minute session, that would be fine.
That'd be fine.
That'd be enough. You would develop for sure. As long as you're loading something difficult for yourself.
Yeah, pushing relative intensity. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
harder than easy.
Yeah. And so
if that's a technical percentage.
And then aiming to progress on it.
And then build from there. So applying principles of training. Which we have we talked about principles of training?
Not really.
Probably
we haven't really talked about too much yet. We got plenty more stuff we need to talk about coming up. It's hard to stay on topic. So
back to the Pareto for nutrition.
Pareto, yeah. So for nutrition, basically, the longer I've been in the nutrition game and figuring out my own stuff, figuring out my client stuff, the more I realize that it looks very complex from the outset, but it's super simple to get most of the results. And so
Right. Yeah.
I started off tracking my macros and trying to get specific types of protein, like spread out through the day and all this stuff. And now I've come down to the point where I'm getting better results just making sure every day I'm hitting a roundabout calorie intake. I'm hitting protein intake to a T. I'm spreading it out through the day as best I can, but that's like still secondary to just getting it in the first place, which is very hard for people. I think I rouse some people more as nutrition clients for not hitting protein intake than I do for over consuming calories or something like that. Like it's because it's very difficult for people to do. And so if you can nail getting your protein intake, I don't care how much like how much fat you're having or from what sources, it's like you're gonna get better results for fat loss.
So it's almost the protein to energy ratio sort of thing.
Yeah, and so like most of my clients now from the outset, I give them a calorie goal and I give them a protein goal. And I say there's a minimum fat intake, so don't cut fat too low. And it's like no lower than 30 ever, but it's like 0.7 grams per kilogram of body mass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen some stuff that some people genetically don't try this, but some people genetically can go to 0.3.
Like super low?
Super low.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it depends on the individual. It's
yeah, it's very, because it's
Yeah.
hit and miss, because if you go too low, you can have like a fair bit of like pushback.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, all the hormones that we were talking about before all require fat. Like
Fat
even
changes.
cortisol is a fat-based hormone.
Yeah.
So
And so you need that fat in your system to be
Yeah.
able to produce the. And so people might get the idea like if I eat less fat, less cortisol.
yeah, but then
Maybe, but-
also less sex hormones too.
Yeah, less testosterone and all
Yeah.
that stuff, and that's what
less
happens.
bile, so you can't digest food. Like
Yeah.
well, bile specific to fat, but like
And so one
Yeah.
thing that happened, and I think this was it my last prep or my first prep or something like that, I cut my fats down to around about 30 grams. And I think it was just way too low for me because at one point I lost all my energy, I lost all my sex drive, I lost my fat loss came to like a grinding halt.
and there was no Adam left.
Yeah, I was
You were
a
empty
shell of a man.
Yeah.
I was a shell of a man.
Yeah.
But then I increased my fat, and specifically saturated fat, in the next week or so. And then all the fat loss came back, and I started feeling even better.
Well, what does saturated fat used to make?
Testosterone, right?
Yeah, well, it's used to make the backbone for all of those hormones, which is cholesterol.
Yeah.
Your liver will make cholesterol out of saturated fat, and then the cholesterol is used to make all the sex hormones and cortisol. All of those sterols. It's the backbone.
Okay.
So
yeah. So you need it. Saturated fat is
your body.
fairly well crucial.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you always, because it's not essential. You can make it, but yeah,
It's better off.
It's like
yourself
carbohydrates.
to-
Well, we talk about carbohydrates, so you can make it, but like, can you make enough, right?
Yeah. And are you gonna feel better doing it? So yeah.
So
So the big rocks for nutrition, if you want to see the most bang for your buck, is just
protein.
protein is going to give you the most bang for your buck from anything you consume or anything you try, any intervention, any fat burners, any supplementation, whatever you do, it's just get protein levels and you will do better than you're doing now.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's like you're chewing at an extra 5-10% on like.
And I suggest that you actually have a look and calculate, if you've never done it before, calculate how much protein you're having. Because you'll have conversations with people and say, oh, I'm eating heaps of protein. And I'm like, I'm having avocado on toast for breakfast. I'm like, well, how much protein? How much protein is in that?
2 grams.
2 grams. You know what I mean? So.
Or I've had people tell me that they eat 100 grams of chicken. It's like, I'm eating 100 grams of chicken. That's 100 grams of protein, right?
No, it's
like,
not.
oh no.
Well, breast is what, 30? Is it?
It's 30. It's like 25 to 30 grams per 100 grams. And so like people, I tell them that and then they go, oh, okay. Ooh.
Yeah.
Like, what about eggs? I'm like 6 grams of egg.
Yes.
And they're like, damn. I'm like, yeah, it's hard. Like,
yeah, you're gonna have 3 to 4 eggs to get a protein
serving.
Yeah.
Like my breakfast is 2 eggs and then 100 grams of bacon to try and get like 40 grams of protein. And like, so I'm eating like 220 grams of protein a day. And that takes me 5 meals getting like 40 to 50 grams of protein. And people think that they can have 1 chicken sandwich for lunch and they're doing okay.
Yeah.
No.
Also, another thing with protein, and I think this is actually a great focus initially for nutrition, is as you get older, it becomes harder for you to absorb protein.
Yes.
So the older you are, the more protein you need. You're like, oh no, I'm past it. I don't need protein anymore. Actually, you need more.
You need more. And it's like, I think Lane Norton said in his book, it's like 1% more a year or something like that. So it gets up to being a significant amount. And then older people tend to dial back their nutrition because they think, I don't need protein, I'm not building muscle anymore. But they're most at risk of...
Now you're losing
Yeah,
muscle.
now you're in the maintenance phase.
Yeah.
Now you're atrophying at a rapid rate because you're not consuming protein, and you're probably like consuming less calories than you need to, and you're doing less as a result. So you get...
Can we just revisit that Lane Norton thing?
Yeah.
He said, I
after
assume
the age of 30. Did I say that?
Yeah, you didn't say that.
I didn't
you
say
said
that.
It's after the age of 30.
After the age of 30, it's like 1% per year after the age of 30.
Okay, I thought it was 50, but that's okay.
Okay, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Ballparkish, kind of. It only adds up to being a little bit more over time, but it still becomes something. And
Wait, no. I think you're right. So he says 1% per year.
Year after the age of 30.
Oh, okay, that makes sense, because at 50 it should be your minimum should be 1.2
Okay.
per 1.2 grams per kg of body mass, whereas at 30 it should be about 1.
Yeah. And that's
it
like
really
recommended.
shouldn't. Yeah, it really shouldn't be lower than 1. You might look at the RDI and it says 0.75 for women and then 0.84 for men. Guys,
that might be to stay alive and
yeah,
like
that's
basic
to
bodily
stop
function,
yourself getting marasmus or like like.
But
Guys,
if you want to
at
not
least-
lose muscle and not lose strength over time, you want to be consuming more than that. Definitely.
Yeah, 1 gram per kg of body mass is probably your minimum. And if you are overweight, that might even help your recon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. More protein always helps with adherence to nutrition and fat loss. Definitely. We're at 51 minutes. Do we keep going? Do we call it there?
We can obviously continue on next time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I think we need to talk more about our big rocks and what we focus on for training.
Yeah,
Maybe
we can
some more
expand.
details.
I think we should. Yeah, next time we'll expand on our Pareto Principle of exercise, nutrition, and then maybe the surrounding.
Yeah, other things
because
you can
there's
do.
other things that might
like,
contribute to that.
Sleep is a massive one that a lot of people overlook, and like
Which
bodybuilders have known it for years. It's like you get like 8 to 9 hours because that's when muscle is being built.
Yeah.
And people are
That's
like,
like the bro science, but it's true.
It's true.
Yeah, I mean it's being built all the time, but like
Well, yeah, but you like a lot of your recovery happens while you're sleeping. And a lot of people like me for years. I got like 4 or 5 hours of sleep because I was working like 2 jobs and all this stuff.
Yeah,
and that was a nightmare. One of my friends came up to me the other day and he's like, "You were literally like fighting yourself to get as big as you are by not sleeping as much as you were."
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's hard.
I know. It was super stressful too, so that didn't help.
Because you're not growing and you get more stressed and then
And then I'm just training hard. Yep. So I could have been a lot bigger than I am now if I was doing the right stuff and had known this stuff earlier. But it's a learning process, and that's like I was saying when I got into nutrition and stuff like that. I was way overdoing it, and I was weighing every meal and each ingredient specifically like to the gram before realizing that it's like to the gram makes less of a difference than just in general being able to stick to it.
Yeah. Adherence is more important.
And the stress that comes involved with like just being that like tedious about things causes probably more harm than good anyway, than being over a couple calories a day or under, or not hitting protein to the T.
Yeah. And most people are not going to do a bodybuilding show, right?
No, absolutely.
Protein intake as a general.
You like get in within a range, and that's big,
Disorder.
And then you're pretty well good. But you got to make sure you get it up high enough, which a lot of people really struggle to. Yeah.
Yeah, and just in summary, right? Get your protein in.
Get your protein in. With nutrition,
Yeah, with
nutrition. All right. Depending on your goals, like get your protein in, then make sure your calorie goal is hit, whether it's for a surplus or a deficit. And don't consume too little fat. Like consume recommended fat or thereabouts, but the absolute macro breakdown, not important. More carbs will make you perform better in your training if you're a person that responds better to carbs. Don't get too caught up in meal timing or anything.
We can talk about that definitely another time though.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it is useful to some extent.
Yeah, meal timing, it's absolutely, but it's like you were saying, like you get 80% of the work done from 20, it's like the extra 10, 20%.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, but not as important as get the groundwork in. If you can get a consistent protein intake, you like every day or roughly, you're going to be doing a lot better than like 90% of people out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Completely agree.
Cool.
All right.
So next time we'll elaborate more on the big rocks and the application of them, I guess, and when it comes to training and stuff like that. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully you guys liked the video. If you enjoyed this, Please like and subscribe. Follow us on Spotify and YouTube and Instagram. Support us. We're really enjoying this, and we're looking forward to bringing you guys more.
Yeah, it's going to be a good journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm having a blast. Awesome.